Hey, welcome into a brand new episode of the Foul Pole to Foul Pole Daily Show, brought to you by my friends over at the Carolina Patriot Collegiate League. I'm your host, Coach Tyler from Black Diamond Softball and Fitness. If you guys are looking to take in some summer softball action this year, look no further than the CPCL. The Fayetteville-based Summer League is coming this June and July. For incoming college freshmen to seasoned veterans, this league is there to help athletes stay sharp and bring the ultimate fan experience. Check out cpatriotcl.com to register, and fans, you can get all the information you need to stay up to date. Today's episode is brought to you by NEXUS Mount. Attention gamers and streamers, say hello to the ultimate solution for capturing game footage, the NEXUS Mount. Our turnkey kit provides a secure and hassle-free way to attach multiple devices to any fence, net, or tripod. Crafted from lightweight aluminum with a powder-coated finish, our mounts are built to last. But that's not all. Our innovative design features a removable shade cover to protect your devices from direct sunlight during outdoor streaming events, minimizing the risk of overheating. Don't settle for anything less than perfection. Unleash the full potential of your streaming experience with NEXUS Mount. Visit us today at nexusmount.com and elevate your game experience. All right, as we get into today's episode, man, there is a lot of buzz going around that long winning streak from the Oklahoma Sooners. So I decided today to take a look at some of the longest standing records and win streaks from some of the teams throughout the years, really. So if we look at what Oklahoma really did over this 71 game win streak, that is something that may never be touched again. Because as we get into some of these long winning streaks, you'll see, man, Oklahoma almost doubled the longest winning streak before that point. So, of course, Oklahoma, they end their winning streak. They had a tough loss against Louisiana. But if you look at what Patty said, she talks about, hey, we just didn't play our best, and we knew eventually this day would come to where we would lose a game. And it is what it is. We just, pick up and move on. It doesn't mean they're not going to be in the national championship. Doesn't mean they're going to win it or not win it. It's just a game. It's a regular season. It's a long season. So, Oklahoma over the last couple of years have built up, this 71 game win streak. It was 53 wins to close out the 2023 season, and they were moving right along this year, had 18 straight wins to start this season. So that's impressive in itself. The Sooners record 48th straight win in game 2 of the Super Regionals. The Sooners actually trailed in that game 7-4 in the 7th, and were down to the very last out. The very last strike, really, against Kinzie Hansen. She sends an 0-2 pitch over the fence, a game-tying 3-run home run, and, of course, the rest is history. They go on to win that game and eventually win the national championship and continue winning all the way up until this weekend. But before that, the longest winning streak in history was back in 1996 and 1997 from the Arizona Wildcats. They owned the longest win streak in NCAA history up until this past year. Arizona won 47 games in a row, dating all the way back to April 5th, 96 to March 23rd, 1997. The team took on the championship in both of those seasons and finished with a combined record of 119-16 for those two seasons. That is impressive in itself. To win almost 120 games in 2 seasons is incredible. And, if you guys know anything about Arizona softball, that was the sort of powerhouse. That was what Oklahoma is today. So back in the day, about 2 decades ago, Arizona was the cream of the crop, and they had the longest winning streak. Well, not too long ago, back in 2019, Oklahoma also had a very long winning streak again. This time it was 41 games. So they actually lost to Wisconsin in the NCAA tournament. It was in the regional, but they had a long tenure, 47 games. That is a lot of games. That's more than half a season. So they finished conference play that year, 18-0. They continued to win their games until they got to the World Series or got to the postseason. And, of course, they lost that game. But did you know, back in 21 and 22, they put up another 40 wins in a row. So if you're catching on to this trend right here, Oklahoma hasn't lost too many games over the last few seasons. I mean, it's an incredible run. They put those 40 wins together, and it's pretty incredible to look at. Back in 2020 and 2021, they had another set, but play got halted due to COVID. So who knows what would have happened that year. They end that season at 56-4, but, Oklahoma has been over the last 5 or 6 years, had just, they'll drop a game here or there, and then they'll go on another tear. Do you remember a couple years ago, the last time they weren't ranked number 1, they ended up facing the number 1 ranked team in UCLA that following week once they dropped out of that number 1 spot. They played UCLA, and they absolutely demolished UCLA. I think it was either 14-0 or 16-0. And, of course, they went on to take that number one spot back and go on to win the national championship that year. But a few other the ones that were sort of a while back that I wanted to remind you of, other than what Oklahoma and Arizona has done over the last couple of decades. Back in 1997, the South Carolina Gamecocks went 38 games without a loss or a tie, and during the same time that Arizona was doing their thing as well. So that season, South Carolina went 63-5, one heck of a run. After securing their first ever SEC regular season and tournament championships, the Gamecocks advanced to their first ever Women's College World Series, where they bowed out, losing to Washington and to Michigan that season. But 97, South Carolina was just as good as anybody else in the league. Back in 2008, the Florida Gators had a 37-game win streak that lasted from March 12th all the way until May 18th. That helped the team reach their first ever College World Series. The Gators went 70-5 that season, 21-7 overall in SEC play. And in a show just to how much talent that group had, they had Stacey Nelson, they had Aya Pacoba, they had Francesca Ania, they had Allie Gardner. All of them made the All-American team that year. So that team was absolutely stacked when it comes to best teams all time in college softball history. And I bet you didn't know, during 1996 season, the Princeton Tigers had their very own 37-game win streak. That was from March 20th all the way until April 28th, before losing to 3-1. And of course, Princeton would hold on to the record long enough. But only a few teams have ever passed that 20-plus, win streak or whatever. So here's a team that you probably don't think about, had a long winning streak, probably not on anybody's radar. But that 96 team also finished that year number one in the Northeast region for the second straight year. But before that, the Tigers were only ranked once in the top 25, the number one team overall, and that was way back in 1985. So that year, Princeton was pretty doggone good. As we keep moving forward, I don't think anybody really remembers that Oregon win streak. Back in 2017, the most recent team that was on that list other than an Oklahoma team was Oregon, and they had a 35-game win streak. That was back in February from April of that year. The Ducks tied an NCAA record because their win streak came in the very first 35 games of that season. They didn't register a loss that year until April 7th when UCLA beat them in the first of back-to-back losses. So they go winning 35 games in a row, and UCLA beats them back-to-back. The Ducks ended up finishing that year 54-8, but man, what an incredible run it was for Oregon back then. Now let's talk a little bit about UCLA back in 1999. A 35-game winning streak is only half as much as what Oklahoma has done, but look how impressive that is to win 35 games in a row. That year, they didn't only break the school records for wins, runs, total bases, home runs, RBIs, doubles, hits, walks, and steals. They also set a record for the record that year with 63-6. 63 games they won that year, so pretty impressive. Back in 1993, Canisius won 35 games as well. If you don't know too much about Canisius, the Golden Griffins, they had 35 wins that season. It was the record back then. That was it. Back in 1993, that was the longest win streak, and was 35 all in one season. It was pretty crazy. Mike Rappel is one heck of a coach. If you check him out, look him up, search him up, Google Mike Rappel Canisius, and look how impressive that team was. That year, that team went 36-3, and they ended up losing a doubleheader against UMass on May 8th, and the team went 1-2 the rest of the way and got pushed out of the tournament. So pretty impressive way back in 1993. Back in 1987, Cal State Fullerton also had 35 wins. So if you look, there was a lot of teams that could get to that number 35 mark, but they couldn't push it over. So to get over 30 or 35 is pretty doggone impressive. If you look at what Princeton did in 96, Florida did in 08, what South Carolina did in 97, and what Oklahoma has been able to do the last few years. So you get to the Cal State Fullerton team back in 1987. They were the first team in history to get to that 35 wins in a row. So kudos to them back in 87. There were no strangers to the spotlight back then. They've won national championships back in 86. They'd get there again in 87, going undefeated from March 6th to April 21st. Now, A little bit less wins, but still impressive. You got a couple of teams that has some 34-game win streaks. You look at the Florida team back in 2015, the Arizona team back in 2000. The Wildcats ended up ripping off 13 games in a row before ultimately losing the national championship game, or not even getting to the national championship game back in 2000. So a few teams have got around that 30-35 mark, but just as impressive as what Oklahoma has done, it's hard to do that, man. You'll see some teams that'll drop a game here or there just because they don't have that stuff that day, and it's hard. Getting a win in Division I softball is pretty incredible. So if you look at what Oklahoma has done, 71 wins, I don't know if that'll ever be touched. And for me, if it is touched, it'll probably be another Oklahoma team, because over the last few years, 5 years, 6 years, man, Oklahoma has been nothing short of impressive. So I hope you guys found that information as amazing as I did, because when I started thinking about who else has got long winning streaks, I know Oklahoma had broke the record way back, but 47 games compared to 71 games, it just shows you how incredible it is that what Oklahoma has done. So if you know someone that would like this information, man, please share it with them. And as always, if you share this stuff with a friend, be sure you tell them you love them.